Hey, this is Tim Sheridan, screenwriter of Scooby-Doo and the Gourmet Ghost and Scooby-Doo and Curse of the 13th Ghost, and you are listening to a podcast named Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
Hey gang, and welcome to another episode of a podcast named Scooby-Doo, the show that attempts to unravel 50 years of mysteries, meddling kids, and masked villains. My name is Mike Josick, and I'll be your guide through all things ghostly and groovy as I investigate every angle of every mystery and beyond. So grab yourself some Scooby snacks, fire up the mystery machine, and let's start the show.
It's Dad calling!
Yes, Dr. Quest.
Race, something's come up. You and Johnny better come on in.
Right, Dr. Quest. All right, Johnny, school's out. Let's get down to the hydrofoil.
Can I use a ski foil?
Okay, but hang on.
Alright, and we are back with part 2 of my interview with Jeff Parker, continuing our deep dive on the 12-issue Future Quest series published by DC Comics, part of their DC Hanna-Barbera line. It ran from May 2016 to May 2017, followed by Future Quest Presents, and an all-around good time if you haven't already read it. And when I say deep dive, I really mean deep dive. I honestly did not expect there to be this much conversation. Part 1, the actual interview part, ran like 25-30 minutes. Part 2 runs about 35-37 minutes. And then there's going to be another like 25 minutes left over for part 3. I think this is going to be my first 3-part interview. And I'm going to try and find some way to... I know for some of you this is a distraction from the Scooby-Doo content, and to have this much time away from a Scooby-related interview might not be so much what you're into, so I'm going to see if I can pair up part 3 with something else, much in the same way that I had Jeff's part 1 come out very close to my interview with Tim Sheridan and Greg Griffin. Not sure exactly what that's going to be, but cross that bridge when I get to it, and hopefully I will have some fun content for you. Over the course of the conversation, much like last time, we talk about Johnny Quest, the Future Quest book, Hanna-Barbera characters, the King Features characters that Jeff worked on, Agents of Atlas, and just making comics in general. As this is going to be kind of a really long series, I guess, no other way I can really put it, I don't want to waste a lot of time with the introduction, so I'm going to let you guys get to the interview as quickly as possible. So if you've heard part 1, you can jump right into this. If you haven't heard part 1, I'd suggest going back and giving part 1 a listen before going into this. Probably not 100% necessary, but, gotta collect them all. Continuity's sake. And I hope you enjoy the chat. I think we talk about a lot of interesting stuff. And with that, I will see you guys on the other side. Enjoy.
Race, come here.
What is it, Doctor?
Look.
What do you make of it?
I don't know.
So I wanted to ask about the title, Future Quest. In a way, it's kind of obvious, but in a way, I'm not really sure where it comes from. And I'm wondering, was it there when you got to the project, or did you have to come up with that?
It was, I was working on some other thing, and I was still going to get Quest in the title, and then Dan just said, it's called Future Quest. That was it. So, at first I was like, well, I guess it's the future compared to, and I was like, you know what, it kind of works. I just after a while I stopped thinking about it, and I wish I could remember what it was. I had some other thing I was going to try to tag onto it.
It's a very Joe Barbera thing for Dan to do.
Yeah, it was perfectly Joe Barbera of him. But then again, the other obvious thing you would have put on it wouldn't work because it's the name of something else that everybody remembers, which is Galaxy Quest.
Right.
It was irritating me because I was thinking, really, Galaxy Quest works, but it's that's already very clearly something else that everybody loves.
And there was even a licensed comic book of that.
Yeah. And it might come back as a TV show.
Oh, really? Oh, yes, I did hear that.
I don't know if that'll really happen, but I remember they were talking about it.
We talked briefly about King's Watch
Mm-hmm.
and your Flash Gordon. By the way, that Flash Gordon it remains one of my favorite comic books, period. It was so fun. I honestly didn't expect that much from it. Nothing against you or Shaner.
Well, you hadn't seen a good Flash Gordon in whatever 70 years.
A long time, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is why when I heard you guys were attached to Future Quest, I was just like, even if it wasn't Johnny Quest, like, I'm in, because your street cred after Flash Gordon was top notch.
Cool.
But you did a similar thing with King's Watch, where you took all of the King Features characters and came up with a big reason for them all to be around and doing stuff before you did your Flash Gordon. I was wondering, and for the life of me, I can't remember the antagonist of King's Watch or the overall plot of it, but I remember when I first read Future Quest, I got a very King's Watch vibe off of it, and I wondered if King's Watch was kind of a trial run in a way. Obviously, Future Quest has a larger scope to it, but...
Yeah, I do think that's why they assumed we could do Future Quest, because we did King's Watch. We're just like, well, that was 3 basic characters, and now or 4, and now we're gonna move up to, I don't know, double or triple that. But yeah, and King's Watch got a lot of good reviews and stuff like that. So I assumed that was a big part of them trusting us with it.
Right. I guess you said Darwin. That was part of Darwin's recommendation.
Yeah. And I think probably Dan read it, and so it's like, if not, it's a weird coincidence. But yeah, King's Watch came together. It was weird because Dynamite had asked me originally, like, I got a list of all the new things they had, licenses they had, and I looked, and it's like, are any of these something you're interested in? I went, Flash Gordon. It's like, I've got an opinion on Flash Gordon. I had this in my head for a long time, that Flash was kind of this guy who's amazingly good at everything that doesn't matter, on our world, like horseback riding and mountain climbing and deep sea diving and caving and everything like that. But our world is one about business and things like that. But then when he's dropped onto Mongo, all of his skills make him the force to be reckoned with. And also the idea that he was old money, that he would kind of naturally be like this. He's just always getting into stuff, and actually did play polo because he went to a college where they played polo.
Right.
So I got to keep that in and not have to update him to a football player or anything like that. He's still doing all the original stuff. Then it was like, well, Mandrake, that was an interesting project, because you realize quickly, like, oh, these characters are the archetypes that everything we read later comes from.
Yeah.
The Phantom has got half of Batman's origin just wrapped around him. He's got a cave, he's got a manservant who helps him with everything. He had a horse, which Batman didn't have all the time, till maybe Dark Knight Returns. Mandrake, obviously, he's the template for all these mystical characters like Dr. Fate and Doctor Strange. Interestingly, people named Doctor. And what I liked in that was the fact that I got to bring Lothar, his sidekick, in and just make him the Phantom. And I was happy that they kept that status quo for quite a while. I was like, good. It's like Lothar works really well as the Phantom.
I agree, yeah. So this is obviously completely unrelated to Future Quest or DC Hanna-Barbera, but why didn't you guys stay on that book? I was crushed when you finished your run and left. Was that all you had planned, or? Yeah,
well, the only thing was we could have had more pages towards the end or whatever. I think, if I'm remembering right, of Doc's baby coming along, that was probably what was eating into our time.
Okay.
But we had planned to wrap it up where we did. It's just that I made some of the stories shorter to make sure that they would actually get done and ship. And then the plan was originally always to, like, hand it off. I know some people were like, but Ming didn't get defeated. But in my mind, Ming never gets defeated. I feel like it's like, no, they're not just going to show up and undo a massive colonialism that's been going on through the galaxy, but they do totally spark this rebellion and get that full sort of thing going, which is not nothing. That's pretty good for 3 people in a rocket ship.
It's little victories.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and also, one of the things I wanted to do with that Shaner did so well is just make Ming charming. I wanted Ming to be kind of fun to see, because he's a great villain. And I like the idea that he's just enjoyed having a real challenger for the first time in centuries, that he kind of can't help but admire Flash.
So now you've got two of these old, like, Fu Manchu style characters that you've retrofitted.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. I think most people their take would be, well, I'll either change them completely or make them go away altogether. And I guess my take is, what if they're likable? Like, what if they're actually kind of cool?
Actually, didn't you also do that in Atlas?
Yeah, you're right. This is it's a running thing now because I did it with the Yellow Claw too. It's like, man, me reforming the Yellow Peril stereotype is some kind of lifelong challenge now. And that's just weird luck of the draw. Everybody I guess it's when you keep putting me on this retro stuff where they had that kind of villain.
I suppose, yeah.
Like, maybe that's why I keep getting the assignments. Maybe it's just simply like, well, he knows how to get out of this awkward situation. Let him do it.
Or they're waiting to finally trip you up.
Yeah. And the same thing in Atlas, Yellow Claw admits that he was kind of playing it up to specifically be a big villain to kind of build up Jimmy's career back in the 50s. Did you read any of those?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, I'm probably not the only one, but I could probably talk to you for days about Agents of Atlas. That was amazing. That was like one of my favorite comic book series of all time as well.
Well, maybe after Ant-Man and the Wasp comes out, since Jimmy Woo's going to be in that, maybe we can do a little special where we just talk about that or something.
Fantastic.
Because I loved working on that series. I like anything, of course, where I get a lot of control, and I did have a lot of control in it. So, I was pretty much able to just make the backstory whatever I wanted. And then,
I was just going to say, and the little things that you were doing, all the little Easter eggs and the website stuff and the extra stuff that you were writing, and it was it was like Lost, the way people treated Lost. Like, it was a very immersive experience. It wasn't just, the paper pamphlet that you were holding in your hands. It was more stuff.
Yeah. I like stuff like that. I like it to feel that way. So good. I'm glad that's working for somebody. If no one else, it's working for you.
And I think I knew Leonard Kirk's work before that, but after Atlas, he was like superstar status for me. He could do no wrong.
Oh yeah. He nailed it. It was fun to work with. And then he and I worked a little bit together on some of the Marvel Adventure stuff.
Yeah.
Around that time. And then when we got our second sort of series out of it, I got to work with Carlo Pagulayan, who I'd worked with. I worked with several times at Marvel, and he's terrific. But to me, it really gels when I got to work with Gabe Hardman, because I felt like his sensibilities fit what we were doing so well. Because we started off with Gabe, like in the flashback stuff. You would go to the 50s, and he was drawing that. And then you came back to Carlo doing the modern day stuff. And then eventually Gabe's doing all of it. But obviously he draws a great gorilla. He's perfect for the robot. He really nailed that feel. I think we like a lot of the same movies and pulp things.
Right. In a lot of ways, it's like you look at something like Atlas, it kind of shouldn't work. It kind of shouldn't work as well as it does, and somehow, it's just whatever spin you put on things, you just have an ability to find that thing that's underneath the surface that's kind of a true thing about it, something that you can kind of lock into. It's more character based, and there's a sense of fun to it as well. Like you get the adventure part of it. You lean into it, you don't run away from it when there's weird stuff. Yeah.
That's the way I like to think about it. You kind of verbalized exactly a lot of process there. That is exactly what I think of. It's like you don't run away from the weird stuff. You dive into it. Because that's where you're going to get the interesting things. It's always the things people assume you're going to throw out. And oh no, I'm keeping that in.
Well, I think I heard you say that in another interview too, where you were saying you have to have a love for the character or the property or whatever it is, but you also have to not have a love for it.
Yeah.
So you have to sort of want to run straight towards it, but also be able to just veer off in whatever direction and not be precious about it. And
it's tough. If you respect something too much, it can really trip you up. Now, to the opposite end, like I had no attachment to Thunderbolts when I started on that. The editor had asked me to do that because I had just worked on the Hood miniseries. And so I had this thing that was just nothing but bad guys. and kind of heavy stuff. So Bill Roseman thought, well, you fit this really well. And I was like, I'll give it a shot, and I went back and read Kurt's stuff. I had never read it before and everything. And I was like, okay, I get this. And of course, there's no getting around that they're essentially the Marvel Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
But they came out of a really cool event where you suckered the readers into thinking they're looking at heroes, and then they find out they're villains. So then diving into it, I had no attachments to any of the characters except maybe Man-Thing, that I liked him. But the great thing was, no matter what I start to work on, I start to get attached to the characters, even when they're horrible, just like, terrible people. But you have it gives you a little more freedom to really do something with them. Like, I got to really bring in Satana and Mr. Hyde and do all this stuff and make up new characters like Troll with Kev Walker. Yeah, by the end of it, man, I really was sad to see that whole thing go. I had really gotten into it. And that was when they started trying out the whole twice monthly shipping schedule, and we were able to bring in Declan Shalvey. And so I decided I didn't want it to be like art styles switch in the middle of something. I thought, no, I'll have two weaving in and out stories and the main artist for each, so that it makes sense that they look a little different. And that worked really well. I mean, I know most artists would prefer to have a big hardback of only their own stuff, but yeah. I felt it pulled it off pretty well.
That actually, just as an aside, I kind of avoided Thunderbolts at first. I came to it late because I was never like a great lover of the title, but I eventually came back around to it because I'd heard good things and you had written it, and so it's like, okay, let's check it out. And yeah, whatever magic you worked on Atlas, you did the same thing on Thunderbolts. It was so entertaining. And characters that I never thought I would give a rat's ass about.
And yeah, we got to do all this time travel stuff, which I love to do, and
the Man-Thing stuff was so fun.
Yeah.
But that actually gives me a nice segue back to Future Quest. Speaking of switching artists, and Future Quest was kind of billed as you and Shaner, but then there was also Ron Randall, there was Aaron Lopresti, Steve Rude, Craig Rousseau. I feel like I'm missing some. You?
Yeah, I popped in for a little bit.
I wondered if that was because of maybe Evan's drawing speed, or
it was.
Okay.
I mean, there was no getting around that. But I feel like we brought in people who fit all the material really well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Steve Rude obviously fit right away.
I don't think you could have kept Steve Rude away from that.
I think Rude assumed we were immediately going to put him with Space Ghost, and we didn't. We put him on Birdman.
Yeah.
But it was great. It was so good. Because I remember him asking, why am I doing Birdman? Because I know you're going to do a really good job. Right? And Ron Randall does all this great adventure story. He's a very much in the Al Williamson mode of adventure.
Right.
So he fit right in there. And then Rousseau was he was just really into it. He kept writing, saying, man, I'm loving this book. And then we were coming up on the parts where the Impossibles were going to start coming in. So I asked him, I'm like, can you guys look at Craig's work again? Because I really think the Impossibles is something he would fit well. Because I wanted to suggest there's still something more cartoony about them.
Yeah.
And the style he used really worked well with that. It's like, yeah, they're still slightly different than all the other characters.
So it was definitely a scheduling thing, but you went into it not looking for just who was available. You wanted specific people to cover specific chapters and specific characters.
Oh, yeah, because there were lots of people who wanted to be involved with that. And it's tough. You're just like, you can't bring everybody in. I was able to do more of that, like with Batman 66. That was one of those rare books where we kind of got to actually cater to a lot of artists, because so many artists would come up and to me or the editor Jim Chadwick and say, this meant a lot to me as a kid. This is why I'm into comics. And we almost every time we said, okay, who did you like? And then I would write a story to suit that artist. And I'm glad I got to do that. I couldn't do it so much with Future Quest because I had to stick to my very deliberate plan, or the whole story wouldn't have worked. But I am happy with everybody that we had in it. I wish Lieber could have got in a little bit of that one too.
Oh yeah.
And I wish I could have drawn more of it. I originally wanted to do more one of those backups than I did, but I ended up just having to just work on my scripts, which were pretty big anyway, and I would often do a lot of layouts because it was a complex story, and bringing in different artists, like I had to keep it consistent. I did a lot of layouts in certain sections, like here's what we're doing to keep everybody on the same page. So I kind of ended up doing a lot of drawing for it that no one sees.
Well, I miss the art, man. It was really nice seeing those few pages with the Zim parts.
That was super fun, and that was the first time I had worked in Manga Studio, which is also called Clip Art Studio.
Right.
Or Clip Paint. I can't ever get the name of it. Clip Studio Paint. Yeah, Steve Lieber and Colleen Coover had both just been railing on me to try Manga Studio because they knew I would like it. And I was like, no, I tried it before and it was kind of hard and I couldn't figure it out like Photoshop. And then Steve's like, just open up your layout in Manga Studio and just mess with the brushes a little bit. And it was. And within a few hours, I was like, oh, okay, I understand how to work with this program. And so I did that all digitally with that.
So why you on those particular pages? It wasn't really like a complete story. It was kind of like, I think it only had like 4 pages.
Yeah, it was
and one of them was like a file.
Yeah, one was a file in Jezebel Jade, and then it's Dr. Zen and the people in the fear layer.
Yeah.
I felt like, and also since I hadn't drawn in a while, I thought, okay, I'm not going to hog like some really good characters all the regular artists want to work on. Like, I'll take the bad guys. I'll just do that and see if I can make that entertaining. But the way that issue was, I felt it was important to start doing short scenes where we jumped through and started kind of seeing where everybody was. Because at that point, we had been doing like half an issue here and half there. And then I wanted it to just kind of cut through so you could start seeing how it was all coming together. That's why it was a lot of short scenes, and I only did the 4 pages.
So did you just want to contribute art-wise to the project, or?
Yeah.
Okay. So you just found a little corner that you could do something in, and
yeah, like, I'll do this. No one will mind this. And then I was kind of like, and I waited to see, like, is anybody going to complain about my section, like me coming in and doing anything? And no one seemed to notice, which I took as meaning work. And I was like, oh, well, it would have been nice if everybody had said, hey, I hope he draws more, but I didn't really hear that either. So I was like, I'll just be glad that no one got taken out of the story by my little section.
I was also curious, Ariel Olivetti is the only artist who only did 1 issue. I think he's the only artist. I was curious why he was chosen for that particular issue.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm correct, I believe he did the whole thing as well.
Yeah, he did do the whole thing. And it's always because they're very big on him doing Space Ghost, because he did that original Space Ghost miniseries. So I think it was always assumed they love working with him, and I like working with him a lot too. He's great. That he was going to do Space Ghost. So we were like, okay, yeah, you definitely are going to lead off this. I think they were suggesting it to me early on, and so then I kind of leaned into making it an Ariel issue. Because if I've got enough time or whatever, I'll keep. I always tend to want to keep the artist in mind. I mean, at first, I'm clearly thinking of Doc the whole time. But then, like, as other artists kind of come into it, I start thinking in terms of, like, okay, well, Ron's drawing this, and I start aiming everything towards this imaginary Ron Randall in my head. Or I started doing it towards Steve Rude. And I did the same thing with Ariel Olivetti. Yeah, now I can't remember exactly how that got lined up. They probably told me that they wanted him to do some chunk of it, like a few issues before I got to it. So I probably just, like, usually I sort of try to zen my way through and bring in people, and try to make it fit so that it doesn't, like, kind of mess up the whole overall thing.
The story in general, there are points where it does sort of have a bit of a schizophrenic feel to it. The Impossibles coming in is one of those points where you're not even just cutting away to another part of the country and some different characters. It's like a backup story, or it's like the back half of the issue with a different title, different artist. Again, was that a storytelling choice that came out of necessity, out of design, out of...
I try to make them all be the same thing. It's always necessity, but if you put enough thought into it, you can make it design too. So it's not me just racing around trying to fix things. It's me seeing the situation I'm going to have, and then like trying to like, okay, how do I make that a strength instead of something erratic?
So why would you choose, instead of like just use another like gigantic crossover as an example, Crisis on Infinite Earths, it just jumps from geographic location to character to character, whereas you have separate stories. You know what I mean? Like you kind of.
I think part of what I was thinking too was I was also trying to slightly get that feel of the way the cartoons were separate stories.
Ah, okay.
And in fact, the thing I was mad at that it never worked out was I wanted to have, in a couple of cases, I wanted to have title cards like they had in the cartoon, like where it'd say My Tour, and then you see My Tour standing there on the side, and then the title underneath it. And I think I got that in there one time, and I meant to do it a lot more than I did, but it didn't work out with the story flow to do it that way all the time. So I did want it to feel almost like you're watching a huge block of cartoons that are put together that are just slowly coming together as a story, and you don't realize it.
See, now I feel dumb, because I'll catch the Vortex comments, but I won't see something as obvious as that.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that I may have not made it as clear as I could have either.
I was going to say, it doesn't happen like every issue, so maybe...
Well, I did give them titles. When it turns into its own little story like that, and that's the thing any TV show does too, though. You can be watching Westworld, and they're suddenly showing you something that really happened 30 years ago. You don't think about it because it's all the same characters and they look the same because they're robots. But, you're like, oh, I'm actually watching an older story right now, and then we're going to come back to the current story. So, and I was definitely doing that with the Impossibles.
I thought it was interesting that pretty much the artists who handled the Future Quest pages, like, for example, Lopresti did the Herculoids. When Future Quest Presents rolls around, Lopresti does the Herculoids.
Yeah.
Olivetti does the Space Ghost. Was any of that planned? Was Future Quest Presents in your minds, or was this all just really nice in hindsight?
Some of it's nice in hindsight. Some of that's like, Lopresti just made it very clear he loved the Herculoids. So he had told me and Dan and everybody who would listen he wanted to draw the Herculoids. So we were very set on the fact that, okay, we got it. You like the Herculoids and you know them inside out. So when I got to the thing where I was going to explain the Herculoids backstory, he was naturally the artist. And it was somewhere like halfway through when they told me, it's like, they were asking, well, are you still wrapping up at issue 12? And I said, yeah. 12 is the natural point where it all gets done. And then they started talking to me about, well, how do we continue it? And, it's like, we want to focus on individual stories. And I said, well, can't it just be an anthology at that point? And then we can bring everybody back in. So it was all kind of natural. Everybody sort of agreed the way it should go. Going forward, like then you'll sit there, then you get like a 3-part Space Ghost story to start it off, and then you go into, Phil Hester and Steve Rude going their Birdman story.
Cool.
And then at that point, somehow it was agreed that I would come in and do single issue stories. I was like, I guess I was hogging the ball too much or whatever. So all my stories after that first Space Ghost story are just standalone issues.
So there's 12 Future Quest issues, 12 Future Quest Presents issues. Do you know if there's anything going beyond that?
I suspect it will just only be in specials, kind of like the way Batman 66 now exists as a special miniseries.
Batman 66 Green Hornet, Batman 66 Avengers. Yeah.
Exactly. It's always him teaming up with somebody.
Did you write the Avengers one?
I didn't. That's the one I didn't do. Well, there's a couple I didn't do, and that was one of them.
Okay. I think
I did the Wonder Woman 77.
Right.
I did the Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Right.
And I'm doing, from the other side, I'm actually working for Archie on this. I'm doing Meets Archie.
Okay.
Which surprisingly goes together way more than I thought it would. Even I thought that. It's like, well, that's going to be weird. But then once we got into it, I was like, oh, no. When you think of it more as the TV show, it actually works pretty well.
I think that's something most people who tackle any of those crossovers with Archie, that's what they come to. I mean, I remember reading something about Alex DeCampi talking about working on the Archie meets Predator or Archie versus Predator, and it was just, you get into it and there's an internal logic that's there, and
yeah,
you just have fun with it.
Well, the weird thing is the Archie characters they're so kind of fixed and iconic. And once you get into it, you just naturally think, oh yeah, this is where Jughead should show up. You just, you go every time probably from thinking like that doesn't make any sense to, well, naturally here's where Betty and Veronica would really figure into the story.
Were there any things that were unexpected that you found when you tackled the project as you were going through it? I mean, obviously, having a love for the characters and being familiar with the properties, you probably had some preconceived notions about. Maybe I'm having preconceived notions.
Yeah, what were your let me hear yours.
Oh, no, I meant me. I'm having preconceived notions, assuming you would have preconceived notions going in, being like, oh, well, Johnny Quest, I can write Johnny Quest in my sleep. I'm so familiar with it. And so I'm going to write a Johnny Quest series with all these other characters, sure. But then when you're actually sitting down, any surprises, anything that came out of it that you were like, I didn't see that coming?
Yeah, well, it's the same thing, like I said, about Thunderbolts, where suddenly I start caring about these characters that, like, man, I didn't give two thoughts about Mr. Hyde before, but now it's like, this is one of my favorite characters. Again, it's like where Doc and I both really got into Birdman, whereas we didn't care about Birdman before. And everybody's like, how is that going to be serious? Because a lot of people just only knew him from the Harvey Birdman stuff of the 90s. Same thing with Space Ghost. They only knew Space Ghost Coast to Coast. They didn't know he ever actually had adventures. Yeah, I'm trying to think about that. Like, is Frankenstein Jr. I didn't think I would get into the Frankenstein Jr. story as much as I did, and then I did. The whole idea of, his little connection to his robot protector and the brain outside of it and everything, and the fact that it was actually kind of patterned on his dad's mind, it started like, that got more real to me as I got into it. Sometimes you make a pitch, and you're just trying to make something that you think sounds like a good pitch. And then you get into it, and then you start really turning it into something, and then you just surprise yourself because you start believing the world. And you have to do that because if you don't believe it, the reader's not going to believe it.
Right.
So you have to tell yourself the story first, and then everybody else can hear the story. And if you're not buying it, you just don't let the story get to that point.
That is kind of how I felt about a lot of the characters in the series, because like I told you, I started not being as familiar with the Impossibles, Herculoids, Frankenstein Jr., and since I've kind of done, a little bit of research, I've explored it, those are some of my favorite. I'm still not really into the Impossibles, but Frankenstein Jr., I dig the Frankenstein Jr. I really enjoyed Rob Williams and Lepresti's Herculoid story that just came out. Oh, yeah. I'm looking forward to your Future Quest Presents number 12 to see more of the Frankenstein Jr. It's got kind of like an Iron Giant sort of feel to it, and I like the relationship he has with his mom, and yeah, there's dynamics to it that I didn't expect. Yeah.
It's a gorgeous story too. I just proofread the PDF of the story. Elaine did such a good job on it. And it's just for people who enjoy Pacific Rim and stuff like that, it's just a giant, big monster fight. But there's a little more going on, as you'll see. And we're still dealing with, the character I made up, Deva, she's kind of like the big mission boss of the whole thing. She's the internation person. Though she's
Falcon 7. You turned her into Falcon 7.
She is Falcon 7. Yeah. Because we didn't need another dude with an eye patch calling shots around here. And I like the idea that was another one of those where I went back and watched Birdman, and I was like, you never really see this guy. He just pops up on the screen for a second. And right away I started questioning, is he even real? Is this one of those little fake things? And then I kept running with that. But I like her. I like her role of coming in and sort of mentoring everybody. She's in a weird position where some of the most powerful heroes that she has to work with are also kids. so that's a very strange thing where she kind of has to work with their parents, like in Mytor's case and everything. Like, I need to send your 13-year-old son out on a deadly mission. Do you mind?
I like that call to the barbecue in your Mytor issue.
Oh, good. Yeah, just like they were just at the park having a birthday party, which is actually a kind of lame birthday party when you dissect it, because his parents didn't think to bring any kids to the thing. It's just all they did the classic thing where it's like they bring all their relatives over, and it's just awful for him, except for the one bit where Haji and Johnny Skype in, to wish him. And I was very happy to do that. It's like, here's how thoughtful the Quest kids are. They're in the middle of fighting some monster in Antarctica, but they stopped and took some time to tell Ty happy birthday.
Actually, we haven't really talked about Ty, and Ty plays a really big role in the series, and he's also a kind of a reimagining of the old Mytor character. And I think Mytor was one of those characters again that I didn't know too much about other than Harvey Birdman, attorney at law. So when you turned him into a little kid of color, and it made no difference to me. It was an interesting story. It was an interesting character. I liked Ty. I liked his cat.
Yeah.
Were you just looking to add a little diversity, or?
I was, and also it was, it's like he was the natural to update to the modern age, because it's like, oh, we can actually make this a legacy character. You know, you can still have that Mytor. He's back in his time doing his thing, but the club gets passed on, and that's a classic way. It's an easy way to create your hero. He gets the club.
Yeah.
But, we established that Ty is pretty heroic and smart, like right from the beginning, because he comes and saves Johnny and Haji while they're being chased by a big robot spider. And he's out there tooling around, taking his grandparents' little boat, running around the Everglades. And even though he's from, as he points out, he's from Baltimore, because when Darwin and I were talking about a character like that, we were in Baltimore. That's why I made him from there. It's like, that's where he's actually born. So I really liked bringing him in, because I feel like every time they try to do that, like in the 90s Johnny Quest cartoon, like, here's Race's daughter, it feels forced, no one quite buys it. You don't buy that Race would have a kid anyway. It just doesn't track. But I tried everything to make sure that Ty would not feel tacked on, that he would be like a natural addition that the kids would like to hang out with. And then, of course, he gets to be a big grown-up superhero at the same time. He's kind of in that Captain Marvel role.
Yeah.
Snag is, that was the thing, the original Mytor had his little dinosaur pal. So I thought, well, let's give him a cat. And that's just Steve Lieber's cat, by the way. Lieber has this rotten cat named Snag. That's actually the cat's name. And I think I just described the cat exactly, and Evan drew it just like, wow, you have no idea how close you got to that real life cat when you drew him in the boat. Because that was the natural thing. It's like, well, a saber-toothed tiger would be a really cool thing to have, and then he can go back to being a cat. He was the only one that gets to kind of run around besides Blip and actually be useful fighting bad guys.
Yeah. I think you're talking about legacy characters, and you're talking about how Mytor is still sort of in his time, and anybody who, loves Mytor, it's not like you went in and completely changed him or whatever. I think that was something that I responded to with the character as well, because even though I didn't know almost anything about Mytor, I still felt like you respected the character and you treated the character he was still well done by, I guess, for lack of a better word. And to bring him back and have Ty meet with him and they have that conversation, and he's just kind of like, oh yeah, I guess the club probably passes on after I'm done. And it seems there's a logic there, and it's almost like that issue, if you are upset, kind of calms you down and goes no, it's cool. This doesn't ruin this thing. You still have this thing, and I think that's something, or that's a way that you approach a lot of the characters that we've talked about, where you've done reimaginings, or you give some thought to it. You're not just going in and being like, I'm just going to change this because I don't like the costume, or I'm just going to change this because we don't have enough black characters or female characters or whatever. It feels organic.
Yeah, that to me is the key. If you just change things haphazardly to suit your taste, it doesn't stick, for one thing, and the reader can sense it.
And you're clearly not flipping the bird at everybody who previously liked this character. It was stupid.
Yeah, because all these characters, every one of them, that's somebody's favorite character, and even if it wasn't my favorite character, I still feel the obligation to do right by them and show the character respect in the story. Sometimes, again, that's not always just being kind of glowing towards the character. Sometimes the best thing you can do for a character is make fun of them and make them entertaining. And that's what I'd try to do with Flash Gordon. Flash, there's a lot of things at Flash's expense. There's a whole lot of humor in there that come at his expense, but it makes him more vital than if I just made him the stoic character who just does everything right. He's not as good a character that way. When you have Flash screw up or go too far or do something stupid, you relate to him and you invest in him more.
But you can also tell that you have affection for that character. It's the difference between saying something mean to a stranger just for the sake of being mean, or, ribbing a friend and giving them a put down kind of for fun. I don't know if that's a good analogy. I'm terrible with analogies.
That's actually perfect, I think. That is exactly what it is. And I think readers can sense that, and I think they can tell, like, oh, you still like this character even though you kind of clowned on him a little bit. Yeah, and the same thing with Mytor. It's like, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to bring in this caveman superhero, which is what he is. The nice thing about Mytor was his whole backstory tied really neatly into Dino Boy and Ugg, because he was clearly supposed to be like a Cro-Magnon, while these other guys that he was often running into were Neanderthals. It's like, and Ugg is a Neanderthal, so it's like, oh, good, I can just have Ugg actually part of his story. And that one part where they're looking at the glyphs on the rock wall, Ugg can read it. He's like, oh yeah, this is about Mytor. Yeah, we all talk about him. He was a big deal back in my day, and that was kind of fun stuff to think of. But yeah, I'm glad that worked for you, because I thought it was a neat special moment to have the two Mytors meet, because they're kind of intersecting. Like it's sort of like he's traveling. His essence is traveling through time, through the club. He's just connecting with them that way. He's not really literally in the past.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure we colored it so that he looks sort of ghost-like while he's there. And I think Mytor even calls him a ghost. But yeah, the nice thing about Mytor, who's from a world where people drop dead, every 2 years in front of him, it's like it doesn't faze him that he's going to die one day. He's like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense.
That tracks.
Yeah, this club, someone else would probably use it. Good. It's like, I'm glad you're still doing my horn thing. That was pretty cool.
And that brings to an end the second part of my conversation with Jeff Parker, writer and contributing artist to the DC Hanna-Barbera project, Future Quest. Also contributing writer to Future Quest Presents, Thunderbolts and Flash Gordon and King's Watch, and currently James Bond Origin for Dynamite Comics. I hope you're enjoying the deep dive that Jeff and I are taking on this material and are looking forward to part 3 and are not just exhausted with the both of us. If you want to check more of Jeff out, there's the aforementioned comics. There's also his website, jeffparkerwrites.com. And you can also find Jeff on Twitter at Jeff Parker. And I should also mention that he'll be attending AwesomeCon this year in Washington, D.C. Those dates are April 26th to 28th. And I should also probably mention that he will be attending AwesomeCon in Washington, D.C. this year. Those dates are April 26th to 28th. And he will also be a guest at Big Easy Con, which is June 1st and 2nd, I believe. Again, if you haven't already read Future Quest, I strongly recommend, if you have any love of Hanna-Barbera adventure characters, or Johnny Quest, or adventure comics, or just really good character-based epic crisis comics, Future Quest, you can't go wrong. It's really fun stuff. Some great artwork by the likes of Ron Randall, Steve Rude, there's some Jeff Parker in there, Eric Doc Shaner, Aaron Lopresti, Craig Rousseau. It's a favorite, and I'll keep plugging it as long as I'm doing these episodes, so there you go. Should be available on Amazon, your favorite comic shop or bookstore. I believe it's split into 2 volumes, 6 issues in each. And I think the Future Quest Presents is also available in trade now. I'll have to actually look that one up. I'll have that straight for part 3. Again, I want to thank Jeff for participating in the conversation and being on the podcast. Always great talking to him. And as I mentioned last episode, I will be putting up the process material that Jeff contributed in the APNSD extra, the bonus content stuff on the WordPress blog, scoobydoocast.wordpress.com. I'll probably have that up by the end of the weekend. This being recorded and released Saturday, March 30th. If you want to contact me, you can find me on Facebook. Just search a podcast named Scooby-Doo. I'm also on Twitter at ScoobyDooCast. ScoobyPodcast@gmail.com if you want to send me an email. I'm also on Instagram. There's the WordPress blog, which I just talked about. And if you want to be a friend of the show, like the Facebook page, subscribe on iTunes, share on your social media, word of mouth. It's better than anything. And I'd really appreciate you spreading the love. The podcast is available on iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Google Play, all good podcatchers, and if you're getting the show off of iTunes While you're there, subscribe, rate and review the show, 5-star reviews, help get the show, works the algorithm, helps get the show into the eyes and ears of people who may be interested in this kind of content but just don't know it's out there and it's not coming up in their searches because algorithms. And as I said earlier in the show, this is a bit longer than I expected it to go, and there's one more episode to go with Jeff, so I'm trying to keep the outro short. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're back next time. I hope you have an active Hanna-Barbera and Scooby life in between. Check out Jeff's website and Twitter, and until next time, I've been your host, Mike Josick. Thanks so much for joining. Take care, and remember...
Oh, boy.
Foolish question number 1. Does it hurt, Race?
Only when I say ouch. What's more important is that we get out of here.
You will never leave this place.
It's Bandit! He followed us!
Silence the animal.